The Broken Warrior. Callan sat alone in the quiet village, the cold wind brushing against his face. His eyes, once sharp and filled with fire, now stared blankly at the distant mountains. The weight of his past pressed down on him, heavier than the worn cloak draped over his shoulders. This village was peaceful. Small homes made of wood and stone, smoke rising gently from chimneys, and children playing without fear. It was far from the war, far from the memories that haunted him every night. Callan had promised himself, never again. He would never fight again. But peace was fragile, and in the darkness of space, a storm was brewing. Callan's hands trembled as he held a small wooden figure, carved with care. It was the only thing that kept him grounded. His breathing grew heavy as echoes from the past filled his mind. The sound of gunfire, the screams of fallen friends, the burning skies of distant planets. It all returned, no matter how far he ran. Suddenly, the soft crunch of footsteps broke his thoughts. Callan turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. A woman stood before him, her cloak tattered, her face calm but determined. "I need your help," she said softly. Callan sighed. "I don't fight anymore." The woman, Elira, did not flinch. "I know who you are, Callan. The warrior who once led humanity's charge against the Xar Dominion." Callan's jaw clenched. He stood up, towering over her. "That man is dead." The Lyra shook her head. "No, that man is still alive, hiding behind guilt." Callan turned away. "Leave." But Elira took a step closer. "They are coming, Callan. The Xar. They will take everything. Burn it all. Even this village." Callan's heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Not my fight." The Lyra's eyes softened. "What if it is?" He stared at her, confused. She whispered, "They're not just coming for humanity. They're coming for you." Callan's breath caught. "Why me?" "Because," Elira said, her voice steady, "you are the only one who ever defeated them." Callan shook his head. "I'm done with war." Elira's gaze hardened. "War is not done with you." She turned to leave, but before she walked away, she said, "When they come, your promise will not matter. People will die, and their blood will be on your hands." Callan sat back down, trying to push her words away, but they lingered like a shadow he could not escape. Night fell over the village. Stars shimmered above, silent and distant. Callan tried to sleep, but his dreams were restless. The past always found him. Suddenly, a loud noise shook the ground. Callan's eyes snapped open. He rushed outside and saw a bright light in the sky. A ship, sleek, dark, and silent. Our technology. It hovered above the village, scanning, searching. Panic spread through the villagers. Callan's heart raced. "They found me." Elira appeared beside him. "They're looking for you." Callan whispered harshly, "You brought them here." She shook her head. "They would have come anyway." The ship's beam scanned the village. Callan knew what would happen next. The Xar never left without taking something, or someone. A child screamed as the beam focused on him. The ship's energy pulled him up slowly. His mother cried out, running after him, but it was useless. Callan's fists clenched. His vow echoed in his mind. Never again. But as the child's frightened eyes locked with his, something inside Callan broke. Without thinking, Callan sprinted. Faster than any human should move. He jumped, grabbed the child from the beam, and rolled to safety just before the ship could react. The villagers stared in shock. Callan, the quiet man who never spoke of his past, had just done the impossible. The ship hovered, now aware of Callan's presence. It fired a warning shot, barely missing him. Elira's voice rang out, "Run, Callan. They know you're here now." Callan looked at the child, tears streaming down his face. He handed him to his mother and whispered, "Stay safe." The ship's engines roared. Callan stood tall, facing it. He didn't have a weapon, but his mind raced with possibilities. The car would return. And next time, they wouldn't leave empty-handed. Elira approached him slowly. You saved him. Kalen, breathing heavily, replied, It doesn't change anything. Elira's eyes were sad but hopeful. It changes everything. As the ship vanished into the night sky, Kalen knew one thing. His past had caught up to him. And soon, he would have to make a choice. A choice he hoped he would never face again. Whispers of the past. Kalen stood in the cold night air, his heart pounding louder than the ship's distant hum. The villagers had gone back to their homes, whispering about what they had just seen. Kalen, the quiet stranger, had moved like a ghost and defied an alien ship with his bare hands. Elira stood nearby, watching him. Her eyes held secrets Kalen wasn't ready to face. Why are they looking for me? Kalen asked, his voice low. Elira didn't answer right away. She stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the faint moonlight. Because you did something no human ever did. You made them afraid. Kalen's fists tightened. That was a long time ago. Not for them, Elira said softly. For the HFY, time is different. They don't forget. They don't forgive. Kalen turned away, trying to push the memories back. But Elira's next words stopped him cold. I know what happened on Vega 9. Kalen froze. No one knew about Vega 9. Not the whole story. Not what really happened. How? He whispered, his voice barely audible. I was there, Elira replied. Kalen's mind reeled. Vega 9 was the battle that broke him. The battle that made him leave. It was supposed to be humanity's victory, but it came at a cost too high to bear. The faces of those he couldn't save haunted him every night. I don't believe you, Kalen said, but his voice wavered. Elira stepped closer. You don't remember me, do you? Kalen turned, studying her face. It was familiar, but distant, like a dream slipping through his fingers. You saved me, she whispered. When the Tar destroyed the Vega colony, you pulled me from the rubble. You promised me everything would be okay. But it wasn't, was it? Kalen's chest tightened. He remembered now. The little girl with tear-filled eyes, clutching a broken pendant. He saved her, but he couldn't save her family. I thought you, Kalen started. Died? Elira finished for him. No, the Tar took me. Kalen's eyes darkened. They took you. Elira nodded, her voice shaking. I was their prisoner for years. They experimented on me, tried to break me, but they failed. Kalen's guilt crushed him. I left the war. I thought I saved you. You did, Elira said gently, but saving me wasn't enough, was it? You wanted to save them all. And when you couldn't, you ran. Kalen turned away, shame burning inside him. You don't understand. Elira's voice hardened. I understand more than you think. I understand that the Tar are coming. And this time, they won't stop until they have you. Kalen shook his head. I can't go back. You don't have a choice, Elira whispered. The night was quiet, but Kalen couldn't sleep. His mind was a battlefield of memories and regrets. Every scar on his body, every nightmare in his head, whispered the same thing. You failed. Suddenly, a soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. He opened it to find Elira standing there, holding a small device that glowed faintly. What's that? Kalen asked. A tracker, Elira replied. The Tar planted it when they scanned the village. They know exactly where you are. Kalen cursed under his breath. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less, Elira said. We need to leave. I'm not leaving these people, Kalen snapped. Elira's eyes softened. Then you'll die with them. Kalen's mind raced. He couldn't let that happen. Not again. Not another Vega 9. Fine, Kalen said. We move them. Quietly. Now. As the villagers packed their few belongings, fear filled the air. Kalen moved quickly, giving instructions, planning escape routes. Elira watched him, seeing the leader he once was starting to surface again. But Kalen's heart was heavy. He remembered leading soldiers into battle, promising them victory, only to watch them fall one by one. Was he leading these people to safety or to their deaths? Suddenly, a young girl tugged at his sleeve. "Mister, are the bad people coming?" Callan knelt down, forcing a smile. "Not if I can help it." The girl's eyes shone with trust. Trust Callan wasn't sure he deserved. As dawn approached, the villagers began their quiet escape through the forest. Callan stayed behind, watching from the shadows. Elira stood beside him. "You're not coming." Callan shook his head. "If I go, they'll follow." Elira's voice was barely a whisper. "You're going to face them alone." Callan's eyes were cold, determined. "I made a promise." "To who?" Elira asked softly. "To myself," Callan replied. "Never again." Elira's voice broke. "Then why are you still here?" Callan looked at her, his voice steady. "Because sometimes promises are meant to be broken." As the first light of morning touched the village, a low rumble filled the air. The HFY were coming. A silent threat. Callan crouched in the shadows as the distant hum of car ships grew louder. The forest around him was still, the calm before the storm. His muscles were tense, his breathing steady. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he stood his ground. He had made his choice. The villagers were gone now, safely hidden in the caves beyond the river. Elira had led them away, though her eyes lingered on Callan until the last moment. She wanted him to come, but Callan knew better. The car would never stop hunting him, and if he stayed with the villagers, they would all die. A low metallic sound echoed through the trees. Callan's sharp eyes caught movement, a patrol drone, gliding silently just above the ground. It scanned the area with a faint blue beam, searching, always searching. Callan pressed his back against a tree, waiting. He could take down a drone easily, but not without revealing his position. He needed to be smarter. The drone passed by, oblivious to his presence. Callan exhaled slowly, but something didn't feel right. The XR never sent just one drone. There were always more. And then he heard it. A soft, rhythmic pulse. Footsteps. Heavy, armored footsteps. Callan's eyes narrowed. XR soldiers. Not machines, not drones, but living, breathing aliens. That meant only one thing. They were serious. In the dim light of the forest, 3 XR soldiers moved with military precision. Their armor gleamed darkly, and their glowing visors scanned every inch of the terrain. The leader, taller than the rest, held a device that emitted a faint signal, a signal meant to track one man. Callan watched them from behind a fallen log. He recognized their formation, their tactics. It was almost familiar, too familiar. Suddenly, a memory surged through him. Years ago, on the battlefield, he had faced a similar squad. They fought like ghosts, striking fast and disappearing faster. But Callan had outsmarted them. He had led them into a trap and destroyed them. But not all of them. Callan's heart pounded. The leader, it had to be him. The one who got away. Commander Valrek. Callan gritted his teeth. Valrek had been a nightmare on the battlefield, ruthless and cunning. And now he was here, hunting Callan personally. The soldiers moved closer, their scanners sweeping the area. Callan knew he couldn't hide forever. He needed a plan. Slowly, silently, Callan reached into his belt and pulled out a small device, a pulse grenade, non-lethal, but powerful enough to knock out electronics within a 20-meter radius. Wait for it. Wait. Now. Callan threw the grenade, and it landed perfectly between the soldiers. A pulse of blue energy surged outward, and the soldiers' scanners flickered and died. Callan sprang into action. He moved like a shadow, striking fast. One soldier turned, but Callan was quicker. A swift kick to the head, and the soldier crumpled. Another lunged at him, but Callan dodged, grabbing the soldier's weapon and using it to knock him unconscious. Valrek, however, stood still, unfazed. His voice, deep and cold, echoed through his helmet. "Still as fast as ever, Callan." Callan froze. That voice, it dragged him back to every battle they had fought against each other. "Valrek," Callan replied, his voice calm but sharp. "I thought I killed you." Valrek chuckled darkly. "You tried. But you failed, just like you failed your people on Vega 9. Callan's fists clenched. "I saved as many as I could. But not enough," Valrek sneered. "You ran from the war. From your own kind. Weak." Callan took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I'm not weak. I'm smart. And right now, you're outnumbered." Valrek tilted his head. Outnumbered. Suddenly, the forest around them shimmered. Figures emerged from the shadows. The Lyra and the villagers, armed with whatever they could find, they surrounded Valrek. Lyra stepped forward. "You didn't really think we'd leave him alone, did you?" Callan's eyes widened. "Lyra, I told you to take them to safety." Lyra smiled softly. "We're done running." Valrek laughed coldly. "This is your army. Pathetic." Lyra's eyes flashed with determination. "Maybe. But humans have a funny way of surprising you." Callan knew they were no match for Valrek, but their courage sparked something inside him. He couldn't let them fight for him. Not again. "No," Callan said firmly. "This fight is mine." Lyra looked at him, understanding in her eyes. She nodded and stepped back, leading the villagers away. Valrek raised his weapon. "One last dance, Callan." Callan smirked. "Let's finish this." The forest became a battleground. Valrek fired rapidly, but Callan moved like water, dodging every shot. He leaped from tree to tree, closing the distance. Valrek swung his weapon like a blade, but Callan ducked, delivering a powerful punch to his side. Valrek stumbled but quickly recovered, grabbing Callan's arm and twisting it. Callan grimaced but retaliated with a sharp elbow to Valrek's helmet, cracking the visor. Both warriors breathed heavily, circling each other. "You can't win," Valrek growled. "Maybe not," Callan replied, "but I'll make sure you lose." In a final burst of speed, Callan tackled Valrek to the ground. They wrestled for control until Callan grabbed Valrek's weapon and aimed it at his chest. "Goodbye, Valrek," Callan whispered. But Valrek only grinned. "See you soon, warrior." Before Callan could fire, Valrek activated a teleport beacon and vanished, leaving only a faint shimmer behind. Callan fell to his knees, breathing hard. He had won, but he knew this wasn't over. From the shadows, Lyra watched silently, her eyes filled with both relief and fear, because she knew the truth. This was just the beginning. The unspoken bond. The forest was silent once more, but Callan's heart was far from calm. He stared at the spot where Valrek had vanished, the echo of their battle still ringing in his mind. He had fought countless enemies in his past, but Valrek was different. There was a connection between them, a dark thread that tied their fates together. And Callan knew that thread hadn't been severed yet. Lyra approached quietly, her footsteps barely audible on the forest floor. She watched Callan from a distance, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the weight in his eyes. She had seen that look before, in soldiers who had lost too much, too soon. "You let him go," she said softly. Callan didn't turn around. "I didn't let him go. He escaped." Lyra's voice held a mix of curiosity and concern. "You could have killed him." Callan clenched his fists. "I tried." "Did you?" Lyra challenged, stepping closer. "Or did something stop you?" Callan finally turned to face her, his eyes sharp but weary. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand," Lyra said gently. For a moment, Callan said nothing. Then, with a heavy sigh, he spoke. "Valrek wasn't always my enemy." Lyra's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Callan's voice dropped to a whisper. "He was once my friend." The fire crackled softly as Callan and Lyra sat beside it. The villagers were still hidden in the caves, safe for now. But Callan knew that safety was temporary. The XR would return, and next time, they would bring more than just Valric. Elira broke the silence. "Tell me about him." Callan stared into the flames, memories swirling in his mind. Before the war, Valric was different. He wasn't like the other XR. He believed in peace, in diplomacy. We fought together once, side by side. We saved lives together. Elira's brows furrowed. What changed? Callan's voice grew bitter. The war. It changes everyone. He paused, then continued, his tone softer. There was a mission. Classified. Dangerous. Valric and I led it. But something went wrong. We were ambushed, and I made a choice. Elira leaned forward. What choice? Callan's eyes were distant. I left him behind. The words hung heavy in the air. Elira's heart ached for him, but she needed to understand. You abandoned him. Callan shook his head fiercely. No, I thought I was saving him. I ordered a retreat, thinking he'd follow. But he didn't. The Kaxar captured him. Elira's voice was barely a whisper. And they turned him. Callan nodded. They didn't just turn him. They broke him, made him into the weapon he is now. Elira placed a hand on Callan's shoulder. It wasn't your fault. Callan chuckled bitterly. Try telling him that. The night grew colder, but Callan's mind burned with thoughts of Valric. Every move he made, every decision, felt like it was being watched, judged by the ghost of his past. Suddenly, Elira spoke, her tone serious. There's something I need to tell you. Callan glanced at her. What? Elira hesitated, then took a deep breath. The Xar didn't just capture me after Vega 9. They used me. Callan's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? They wanted information, Elira explained. Not just about humanity, but about you. Callan's heart skipped a beat. Me? Elira nodded. They knew you were special. Different. They wanted to understand why one human could outfight their best soldiers, outthink their best strategists. Callan's voice was low. And did you tell them? Elira's eyes filled with pain. I held out for as long as I could. But they have ways. I told them about your tactics, your weaknesses. Callan's expression was unreadable. So that's how Valric found me. Elira's voice broke. I'm sorry, Callan. I didn't mean to betray you. Callan looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, You didn't betray me. They did. Elira blinked back tears. I thought you'd hate me. Callan shook his head. I've made too many mistakes to hate someone for theirs. As dawn approached, Callan stood at the edge of the forest, watching the horizon. Elira joined him, a question in her eyes. What now? She asked. Callan's voice was firm. We prepare. The XR will come, and when they do, I'll be ready. Elira studied him. And Valric. Callan's jaw tightened. I'll save him. Elira's eyes softened. Even if he doesn't want to be saved. Callan's gaze was steady, especially then. A faint smile touched Elira's lips. You really are stubborn. Callan smirked. You have no idea. As the sun rose, casting light over the quiet forest, both knew that their peace wouldn't last. The battle was far from over. But this time, Callan wasn't fighting alone. And somewhere in the darkness of space, Valric prepared for their next encounter. Not as an enemy, but as something more dangerous. A broken brother. Shadows of the battlefield. The forest stirred with the whispers of an approaching storm. Callan stood at the edge of the clearing, eyes scanning the horizon. Every fiber of his being was on high alert. The XR were coming. He could feel it, like a shadow creeping closer. Elira approached him quietly, her voice soft but steady. They'll be here soon. Callan nodded, his jaw clenched. I know. The villagers were hidden deep in the caves beyond the forest, but Callan knew that wouldn't be enough. The cover didn't leave loose ends. And now that Valric had returned, Kalen understood that this wasn't just about him anymore. This was personal. Elira watched him carefully. You're thinking about him. Kalen's eyes darkened. I can't stop. She stepped closer. He was your friend. It's natural. Kalen let out a bitter laugh. Friend. He was more than that. We fought side by side. We saved each other's lives more times than I can count. And now, he wants to kill me. Elira's voice was gentle but firm. Maybe there's still hope. Kalen turned to her, his gaze sharp. Hope doesn't win wars. Elira met his eyes. But it keeps you fighting. The night grew colder as Kalen and Elira prepared. Kalen checked his weapons. Primitive compared to the advanced technology of the XR, but effective in the right hands. His hands. Elira watched him with quiet admiration. You're not like other soldiers. Kalen smirked without looking up. I'll take that as a compliment. It is, Elira replied. Most soldiers fight because they have to. You fight because you care. Kalen's hand stilled. He looked at her, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Caring is what gets people killed. Elira shook her head. No, caring is what makes you human. Kalen didn't respond. He couldn't. Suddenly, a distant hum filled the air. Kalen froze, listening intently. The hum grew louder, closer. His instincts screamed a warning. They're here, Kalen whispered. Elira's eyes widened. What do we do? Kalen's voice was calm, steady. We fight. The trees trembled as sleek, dark ships descended, their engines silent but menacing. Kalen recognized the design immediately. SAR infiltration crafts. Small, fast, deadly. Kalen crouched low, signaling Elira to stay behind him. The ships hovered above the clearing, scanning the area. A voice echoed through the still night, distorted but familiar. Kalen. Kalen's blood ran cold. Valrek. Come out, Kalen, the voice taunted. You can't hide from me. Kalen's mind raced. Valrek wasn't just looking for him. He was playing with him. This was a game, and Kalen hated games. Elira whispered, It's him, isn't it? Kalen nodded grimly. Stay close, and no matter what happens, don't let them take you. Elira's eyes filled with determination. I'm not leaving you. Kalen sighed. Stubborn. You have no idea, she replied with a faint smile. The first wave came fast. Tsar soldiers, heavily armored and armed with plasma rifles, spread through the forest like shadows. Kalen moved like a ghost, silent and precise. He took down the first soldier with a swift blow to the back of the head, grabbing the alien's weapon before it hit the ground. Elira followed closely, her breath shallow but steady. She wasn't a soldier, but she had survived worse. Shots fired through the trees, lighting up the night. Kalen ducked behind a fallen log, firing back with deadly accuracy. One by one, the soldiers fell, but Kalen knew this was just the beginning. Suddenly, a sharp voice echoed through his comm device. Impressive. But you know this is pointless. Kalen's grip tightened. Come and find me, Valrek. A dark chuckle filled the air. Oh, I intend to. As the battle raged, Kalen's mind was a whirlwind of memories. He remembered the first time he met Valrek, a young, hopeful soldier with a sharp mind and a wicked sense of humor. They had laughed together, fought together, built together. And now, they were enemies. Elira's voice broke through his thoughts. Kalen, behind you. Kalen spun just in time to block an incoming strike. A XR soldier lunged at him, but Kalen was faster. He disarmed the soldier and delivered a swift, final blow. But as he turned back, he felt it, a presence cold and familiar. Valrek. Kalen. Valrek's voice was low, almost amused. You've gotten slower. Kalen's eyes narrowed. And you've gotten uglier. Valrek chuckled. Still funny. I see. Kalen's voice was sharp. What do you want, Valrek? Valrek's helmet retracted, revealing a scared face with piercing eyes. You know what I want. Kalen's heart pounded. Revenge. Valric shook his head. No. Redemption. Kalen froze. What? Valric's eyes softened just for a moment. I didn't come here to kill you, Kalen. I came here to end this war. Kalen's mind raced. Was this a trick? A trap? Or the truth? Elira stepped forward, her voice wary. Why should we believe you? Valric's gaze flickered to her. Because I have nothing left to lose. Kalen's voice was low. And everything to gain. Valric nodded. Exactly. The silence stretched between them, heavy with uncertainty. Finally, Kalen spoke. What's your plan? Valric's eyes burned with determination. We take down that car. Together. The breaking point. The forest felt unnaturally still as Kalen stared into Valric's unflinching eyes. The tension between them was electric, years of history crackling in the air. Elira watched from the side, her hand hovering near her weapon, unsure if this was a trap or a fragile moment of truth. Kalen's voice broke the silence. You want to take down the Xr, after everything you did for them. Valric's lips curled into a bitter smile. I never did it for them. I did it because they gave me purpose when I had none, when you left me behind. Kalen's fists clenched. I didn't leave you. But you didn't save me either. Valric shot back, eyes blazing with old wounds. I was alone, Kalen. Alone in their hands. Tortured. Twisted. I became their weapon because they made me believe I had no choice. Elira stepped forward cautiously. And now? Valric's gaze softened, but only slightly. Now I know the truth. I was never their weapon. I was their prisoner. And I'm done being a prisoner. Kalen's voice was sharp, filled with mistrust. So you're just switching sides. Just like that. Valric's chuckle was hollow. You think this is easy for me. I've done things I can't undo. Killed people I can't bring back. But there's one thing I can do. Kalen narrowed his eyes. What's that? Destroy the ones who made me this way, Valric whispered, his voice filled with a cold determination. Kalen studied him, every instinct screaming at him not to trust. But beneath the scars, beneath the bitterness, he saw something familiar, something real. A broken man, desperate for redemption. Elira pulled Kalen aside, her voice low but urgent. You're not seriously considering working with him, are you? Kalen's eyes flickered with uncertainty. I don't know. You can't trust him, Elira insisted. He's dangerous. So am I, Kalen replied softly. Elira's eyes softened. You're not like him. Kalen shook his head. We're more alike than you think. Elira grabbed his arm. Kalen, please. What if this is a trap? Kalen looked at her, torn. Then I'll deal with it. Elira's voice broke. You can't do this alone. I'm not, Kalen whispered. Not anymore. Elira let go, her eyes filled with worry. Just be careful. Kalen nodded, then turned back to Valric. All right, let's hear your plan. Valric smirked. Smart choice. Don't make me regret it, Kalen warned. Valric's eyes gleamed. No promises. Hours passed as Kalen, Elira, and Valric huddled around a crude map drawn in the dirt. Valric pointed to a location deep within the XR territory. This is their control hub, he explained. All communications, fleet commands, and surveillance flow through here. Elira frowned. Heavily guarded, I assume. Valric nodded. Beyond heavily. But there's a weakness. A small maintenance tunnel here. He pointed to a narrow path, leads straight to the core. If we can get in, we can shut down their entire network. Kalen crossed his arms. Sounds too easy. Valric's smile was grim. It's not. The tunnel is rigged with traps. And if we get caught, well, let's just say they won't be kind. Kalen's eyes darkened. When are they ever? Elira's voice was steady. So what's the play? Valric looked at Kalen. We go in quiet, fast, and ruthless. No mistakes. Kalen held Valric's gaze. If you betray me? Valric interrupted with a smirk. You'll kill me. Yeah, I know. But trust me, Kalen. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. Elira muttered under her breath. Comforting. As the trio prepared for the mission, Kalen felt the weight of what was to come pressing down on him. He sat alone for a moment, staring at his reflection in a small pool of water. The man staring back was no longer the same warrior who had vowed never to fight again. That man was gone. Elira approached quietly, sitting beside him. You okay? Kalen chuckled softly. Do I look okay? Elira smiled faintly. No, but you never do. Kalen sighed. I'm tired, Elira. Tired of fighting. Tired of losing. Elira placed a hand on his shoulder. Then let's win this one. Kalen looked at her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Yeah, let's. The journey to the Qatar control hub was treacherous. Every step felt like a gamble. Kalen moved like a shadow, with Elira close behind. Valric led the way, his knowledge of the Xar's operations proving invaluable. But trust was a fragile thing, and Kalen felt it slipping through his fingers with every moment they spent relying on Valric. As they reached the entrance to the maintenance tunnel, Kalen pulled Valric aside. If you're lying. Valric's eyes were sharp. I'm not. Kalen nodded reluctantly. Let's go. They navigated the tunnel carefully, avoiding traps and sensors with precision. But as they neared the core, a soft alarm echoed through the walls. Elira's eyes widened. They know we're here. Valric cursed. We have to move. Now. Kalen's mind raced. Go. I'll hold them off. Elira grabbed his arm. No. Kalen's voice was firm. Elira, go. Valric nodded. He's right. We don't have time. Elira's voice broke. Kalen. He softened. I'll find you. She nodded, tears in her eyes, then followed Valric toward the core. Kalen turned to face the approaching Khar soldiers. His heart pounded, but his resolve was unbreakable. All right, he muttered. Let's do this. The first soldier lunged at him, but Kalen was ready. He moved with deadly grace, taking down one enemy after another. But the numbers were overwhelming. As Kalen fought, a voice echoed in his mind. Sometimes, to save peace, you must embrace the storm. And Kalen was ready to embrace it. The warrior reborn. The cold, metallic hum of Khar weapons filled the tunnel as Kalen fought with everything he had. His body moved on instinct, every muscle honed from years of battle. Plasma bolts zipped past him, scorching the walls. Kalen ducked, rolled, and struck back with brutal efficiency. Each enemy that fell was replaced by another, but he didn't falter. He couldn't afford to. Far ahead, Elira and Valric raced toward the control core. The sound of Kalen's battle echoed behind them, each clash a painful reminder of the man they left behind. Elira's heart ached. We have to go back for him. Valric didn't slow down. If we fail, his sacrifice means nothing. Elira clenched her fists, her mind racing. She didn't want to leave Kalen behind. Not after everything they had been through. But she knew Valric was right. This better work, she whispered. Valric's voice was grim. It will. Back in the tunnel, Kalen's breath came in sharp gasps. His body screamed for rest, but his mind pushed forward. He couldn't stop. Not now. A Xar soldier lunged at him, but Kalen sidestepped, grabbing the alien's weapon and using it against him. Another soldier fired from behind, grazing Kalen's shoulder. He gritted his teeth and retaliated, taking down his attacker with a precise shot. But then, silence. Kalen froze, every nerve on edge. From the shadows, a slow, deliberate clap echoed. Impressive, a voice said. Cold, familiar. Kalen's eyes narrowed. Valric. But as the figure stepped into the dim light, Kalen's breath caught. It wasn't Valric. It was the Xar High Commander. A towering figure with piercing crimson eyes and armor that seemed to absorb the light around it. The commander's face twisted into a cruel smile. "You've been quite the nuisance, human." Callan raised his weapon. "And you've been quite the disappointment." The commander chuckled. "Bold, but boldness won't save you." Callan's grip tightened. "Maybe not, but it'll hurt you." Elira and Valric reached the control core, a massive chamber filled with glowing screens and endless streams of data. The core pulsed with energy, the heart of the XR's operations. Valric hurried to a terminal. "Cover me." Elira nodded, weapon ready. "How long?" "Not long," Valric muttered. "If I mess this up, we're dead." Elira forced a smile. No pressure. As Valric worked, alarms blared and doors sealed shut behind them. "They know we're here," Elira said, scanning for threats. Valric grinned despite the tension. "Let them come." Callan faced the High Commander, heart pounding but mind clear. "You should have stayed hidden." The commander sneered. Callan smirked. "I don't do hidden well." The commander lunged, faster than Callan expected. He barely dodged, rolling away and firing a shot that the commander deflected effortlessly. Callan cursed. "This isn't going to be easy." They clashed, the commander's strength against Callan's speed. Every strike was met with equal force, every move countered. Callan's mind raced, searching for a weakness. But the commander was too strong, too fast. Callan was running out of time. Elira paced as Valric typed furiously. "Hurry. I'm going as fast as I can." Valric snapped. "This system is more complex than I thought." Suddenly, the doors blasted open. XR soldiers poured in. Elira fired, taking down the first wave. "We're out of time." Valric's eyes widened. "Got it." He pressed a final button, and the core pulsed violently. The lights flickered, and the alarms fell silent. Elira turned to him. "Did it work?" Valric nodded. "I shut down their network. No communications, no reinforcements." "But?" Elira asked, sensing hesitation. Valric sighed. "But it's temporary. We need to destroy the core to make it permanent." Elira's eyes hardened. "Then let's do it." Callan dodged another strike, but wasn't fast enough. The commander's fist slammed into his chest, sending him crashing into the wall. Pain shot through him, but he forced himself up. "Still standing," the commander mocked. Callan grinned through the pain. "You hit like a child." The commander roared, charging again. Callan's mind sharpened. Now or never. As the commander lunged, Callan dodged at the last second, grabbing a fallen weapon and firing directly into the commander's back. The alien screamed, staggering. Callan didn't waste the moment. He attacked relentlessly, every strike fueled by his determination to survive. But the commander wasn't done. With a roar, he grabbed Callan by the throat, lifting him off the ground. "You're finished," the commander growled. Callan's vision blurred, but a faint smile touched his lips. "Not yet." Elira and Valric placed charges around the core. "Ready?" Valric asked. Elira nodded. "Do it." The charges exploded, and the core began to collapse. The entire base shook violently. Valric grinned. That should do it. But Elira's mind was elsewhere. Callan. Valric's smile faded. "We need to go." Elira hesitated, then nodded. "Let's find him." The commander tightened his grip on Callan's throat, but Callan's eyes burned with defiance. Suddenly, the ground shook. The commander faltered, and Callan took his chance. He grabbed a blade from his belt and drove it into the commander's chest. The alien gasped, eyes wide with shock. Callan whispered, "Checkmate." The commander fell, lifeless. Callan collapsed, breathing heavily. He had won. But he wasn't sure if he'd survive. Elira and Valric found Callan moments later. "Callan," Elira cried, rushing to his side. Callan opened his eyes weakly. Took you long enough. The Lyra smiled through tears. You idiot. Valric smirked. Nice work, hero. Kalen chuckled softly. Did we win? Lyra nodded. We won. Kalen sighed, relief washing over him. But he knew this was just the beginning.